Hi, this is George Lucas. I'm the director of Revenge of the Sith, the third installment in the Star Wars saga.
Hi, I'm Rick McCallum. I'm the producer of Episode 3.
Hi, I'm Rob Coleman, and I was the animation director on the film.
I'm John Knoll, and I'm visual effects supervisor on Episode 3.
And I'm Roger Guyett, one of the two visual effects supervisors on the project.
And one, I would say, certainly one of the most extraordinary special effects.
Here we are with the familiar opening crawl. I've done the crawl myself on all three pictures, so this was done exactly the same way, starting from the same source files and just substituting in the new text.
This was done in the style of a 1930s Saturday matinee serial, which were usually in 12 episodes. Everything is done in that style. Everything from the acting to the design of the crawl to even the story elements are based on a particular style that was very, very prevalent in the 30s.
The film has been released in over 100 countries simultaneously.
George always wanted this to be an enormous, epic opening, and he specifically picked this big Jedi ship. For those of us that had seen the original trilogy, it's a sort of a precursor, I guess, to what we're going to see in the Episode 4 when a very similar ship comes over the top of camera.
In this particular shot, because this sequence goes on for a number of minutes, this is probably the longest continuous shot, single shot, in any of the films. I wanted something that says war, introduced our two main characters, which we can recognize by the two ships, and establishes the fact that there's a battle, but sort of reveal things one at a time.
We start by seeing how the larger ships are engaging each other. This is something we've never seen in Star Wars before. How do two of these mile-long ships attack each other?
They wouldn't be firing at each other at this massive distance. They'd be alongside, like kind of old Spanish galleons firing at each other.
Now that we have digital technology, we can actually do a shot like this, which we struggled with back in the old days. So this was sort of a way of making our dreams come true at ILM and also just as a filmmaker.
The piece flying out of the explosion and hitting that Star Cruiser is a kitchen sink.
The ILMer said there was so much in this shot that there was everything in it but the kitchen sink.
So now we put a kitchen sink.
General Grievous' ship is directly ahead. The one crawling with vulture droids.
Oh, I see it. Oh, this is going to be easy.
So this opening shot, it has a lot of elements in it and took us a little over a year to complete.
George felt very strongly that we needed to have choreography on these planes, and he reminded us that he was really happy with the work that ILM had done on Pearl Harbor. So we specifically went after Scott Benza and Glenn McIntosh, who were my lead animators for this sequence, and they did a great job. They had about 6 or 7 animators working with them.
This shot, we established, I've got to set up the fact that the clones exist. So at the shot with the two clones, you see both of them, and they look kind of like, it's a subtle way of setting up the reality of clones. There's a lot of exposition that's going on in this first few shots. Everything from early X-Wings to old vulture droids. And then to make an exciting sequence that has some suspense in it.
This is classic George. This is how do I tell a story completely visually, just effects and music.
And one of the things that makes this space battle different than the other Star Wars pictures is that we're saying this is not in space exactly. We're in the upper atmosphere of Coruscant, which gives us excuses to do things like drag. You'll see there's smoky trails behind burning ships. There's bits of atmosphere, hanging smoke.
George never stopped playing around with it right up to the day that we actually finished a year and a half later.
Oh, I remember him re-looking at it and cutting it down, and also what the audience should be looking at. Do you remember that? Like some of the explosions, how many droids there were, whether or not they were the right numbers of things.
So throughout the sequence, we were always looking for opportunities to put in sweeteners, places where, boy, this shot could use two ships colliding in the background or something on fire going down.
I wanted to do a different kind of space battle sequence, so we invented these little droids that come out of the missiles.
The buzz droids were brand new for us. They were a lot of fun. They were reminiscent of spiders for us because they were creepy and they were tearing apart Obi-Wan's ship.
Just a different way of approaching missiles blowing things up, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more interesting and odd.
Be careful!
This is when George is having the most fun, when he can just sit back with his editor, with Roger and Ben and Jet, Sally, who was our assistant editor, and just nudge these things along.
The point to this beginning here is that we now establish that Obi-Wan and Anakin are partners, that Anakin is no longer a Padawan learner, that they're friends, and they rely on each other, which is important to develop so that when we get toward the end of the movie, we understand the tragedy of them having to fight each other.
So the way we actually work this is he'll call us and he'll watch the sequence with us, and then he'll say, look, I need a close-up of this. I want 2 more buzz droids added onto this wing. I want Anakin to try and get rid of these buzz droids, and I wanted a medium shot, 50-millimeter lens. Very precise stuff. The guys would then go and try and complete those shots, and we were averaging between 10 and 12 shots a day, and it was fascinating to watch him just have the opportunity to be able to do this kind of armchair directing.
This sets up that they're equals, even though Anakin kind of makes a few mistakes. Obi-Wan makes a few mistakes. One isn't significantly more in charge than the other, which is the important part of the sequence.
R2, hit the bus droid, center eye!
I also like the idea of having a little duel between R2 and one of the buzz droids, so that we could make R2 more of a hero. This is his action picture. And so anytime I had a chance to put R2 in an action sequence, I tried to do it, because I knew in the first half I had a chance to do that. But then in the second half, the droids, almost everybody drifts away.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
Every movie has, I have a bad feeling about this. It's sort of our little joke line.
So this is a digital character, the shot of Obi-Wan leaping out of his cockpit. The reason being, of course, is we couldn't get a stuntman to do that. It's always better to have a real person in there. And we do tricks where we replace a head or replace part of the body.
The hangar is a combination of miniatures and computer graphics. There's almost no set that was built in Sydney. We had a bit of dressed floor and a small section of wall where R2 plugs into. But everything else around him is all added later.
This whole rescue bit is about 20 minutes of the movie. Originally, it kind of had more action in it. It was a little bit more intense. But then I decided to give it some breaks. So we have an action sequence and then a little bit of a break from all of that to kind of get our wits about us. And then I go into another action sequence and then another break. But taken as a whole, it was meant to be one long, intense action sequence.
You can see a digital R2-D2 here when he catches the little communicator. We did that for shots where we needed to have control over R2. Here's our entrance for Grievous, our new bad guy for the film.
I went to a lot of trouble to get a nice, different look on Grievous. This face armor has got this sort of translucent quality to it.
It was a lot of fun to animate Grievous, quite frankly. And, whenever we have an opportunity to animate something that has not been established before, where we don't have to match into someone wearing a costume, the animators are really excited because we get to create all the mannerisms, all of the actions, and create walks and movements. So he was certainly a character that a lot of animators are requesting work on.
This sequence in the elevator is as much to, again, give R2 a little bit of space and give him a chance to be in the movie. I love R2, and I wanted to get a chance to have some fun with him at the very beginning of the movie when I knew I still had time to do that.
We don't want to get out. We want to get moving. R2, activate elevator 3.
And again, build up the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, because I wanted to make sure people felt they were very comfortable with each other and friendly with each other and sort of had gotten over this petulant rivalry that existed in the last movie.
Well, I have to be honest, I always felt that the elevator sequence dragged down. The only way I thought you could speed it up and get them to Palpatine's office was to eliminate all the R2 stuff, and God, was I wrong, because people really reacted.
Oh, they loved the R2 stuff, didn't they? Yeah.
R2.
And that's why I'm a producer. I live on the dark side all the time.
There was a lot of discussion to pull this sequence out of the movie, but that's one of my favorite sequences. He refused to let it go. I like R2.
I'm still a big fan of miniatures. I think that they always look realistic if you shoot them properly, and in a way that's very, very difficult to do with computer graphics. To get computer graphics up to that same level is a constant struggle, and to some extent that happens free with models. Once they're built, light them on the stage, and the photography you get is constrained by physics to be something that you could shoot. Whereas with computer graphics, the only thing that constrains the look to be realistic is your own eye. So it is a lot more work to get the realistic result with computer graphics.
Oh, it's you.
From my point of view, I think this was for R2 the funniest sequence for all the R2 fans, which I'm one of the biggest ones.
This little sequence here with R2 and the super battle droids was added in because George wanted to add a little bit of humor for our younger audience members, and R2 was a perfect candidate for that. Little explosion there that George actually wanted a bigger explosion right there, but that's what we ended up with.
And this was pretty much a sort of mixture of the real set, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
the CG thing, one of the big CG environments.
This is probably the largest set we built for episode 3.
I love that lighting detail as they
Beautiful.
travel across with the grated light effect across them. And you remember these handcuffs? That
Yeah.
was something as well. That
Yeah, these were originally, you couldn't tell what was holding him down. So we
Yeah.
worked on those quite a bit and also changed the color a couple of times. They were red.
I was about to say that.
That really is Christopher Lee who did that. It's pretty amazing. 82 years old. Just phenomenal.
I mean, he had a couple of takes. on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but he got it right second time, right?
To do that shot, we could have had a stuntman jump, but we would need crash pads there, so it was easier for us to do as a digital character.
I had Christopher Lee for one day, and he was having a hard time doing fighting. So we shot all these close-ups of the dialogue and the very extreme close-ups.
Most of the shots on this sequence are Kyle, the stuntman, with a head replacement. Any of the shots that aren't close-ups.
We had had a lot of discussions about the face replacement, and George was kind of nervous about it. And Christopher, really made an effort to do as much stuff as he possibly could.
It was about 6 weeks before this set was going to be built. So all the close-ups of Christopher Lee were shot just against a blue screen.
So a shot like this is actually Kyle performing the action as choreographed by Nick Gillard, stunt coordinator. And then we'll carefully go in and track in a digital version of Christopher Lee's head. We did take very precise photos of Christopher and did a scan of his head and created a brand new version of him for this film. And then we were able to track it in.
Which allowed us to do the scenes, but it still really looks like Christopher Lee.
I was very pleased with the way those head replace shots turned out. I think they look pretty good. Shots like this are much tighter than anything we did on episode 2.
I think it's a really successful sequence.
That's great. Yeah, you, Skywalker.
The major issue here is I put Dooku in after Darth Maul was killed to establish that the Emperor's assistant, or the other Sith, could take Jedi and convert them. In this particular case, the idea is that Palpatine is testing Anakin to see if he's strong enough to become his apprentice. And he doesn't tell Dooku what he's actually up to. Dooku thinks he's just going to fight him.
Good, Anakin, good. Kill him.
But the whole thing is a setup by the Emperor to test Anakin's strength. And when Anakin is strong enough, which he proves to be by killing Dooku, then the Emperor is ready to convert him over to the dark side to become his new apprentice.
Now, here's where I must say, this is from the dark side, I really felt that we were going to have a hard time
With the
this episode.
hands cutting.
Well,
the
first
head.
of all, the hands, and then this is just brilliant when his head goes off. But I thought he had actually done that just to wind me up because we had started talking about the sensors, and I was very happy you kept that in because it's a great little moment.
It is, isn't it?
Those color bands around his wrists were actually added later on in the production just to bring attention to the fact that he's being held by a force field. Other thing I've noticed, you'll see there's all these ships in the background that, there's people that actually have to work all that action out. We actually do have a continuity and a flow of the battle, even though it's out of focus and behind us. We have to keep track of what ships are moving and which actions are happening, and all of that is planned out in great detail.
Anakin, there's no time. We must get off this ship
You
before
can
it's
see that Palpatine is interested in separating Anakin from Obi-Wan. There were a few other scenes where he was doing what he could with gossip and whatnot to make Anakin not trust Obi-Wan, but in the end I felt it was sort of overdoing it.
Here we come back to Grievous again. These are all digital clones. I think everybody knows this by now, but every clone you see in this movie is a digital character. There was never a costume built. I was meant to ask George why.
This whole sequence is just fantastic. None of this is built. This is all digital.
The sequence with the battleships at each other is from an old pirate movie or an old seafaring movie from the 1700s, where the two battleships go next to each other at just point-blank range, trying to blow each other out of space. It's the kind of battle we haven't actually seen in Star Wars. I thought it would be a good way of getting us into the situation where the ship has to crash and land.
Reverse stabilizers.
Reversing stabilizer.
This was a complicated sequence. It went on quite a bit more also before we trimmed it down. They had different experiences in the elevator, different experiences in the hangar. But this whole opening piece, actually, I think when we first cut it together, was about an hour, and we had to cut it down to less than a half an hour. It's not nearly as exciting when it's longer. Sometimes shortness is best.
This is one of these shots that was just very hard to simulate. R2 slamming into the droids. Very difficult to simulate simply because of all the moving pieces.
Leveling out.
Now I have a really brief cameo right here. I'm Anakin's hand that catches the cables. There.
I know a lot of people we're just commenting on the level of detail on these ships as well, which I think, you kind of take for granted after a while, but just the actual amount of information, in all of the frames, how rich the frames are.
Well, they really are designed to be seen 2 or 3 times. Well, there's a common misconception about Star Wars that we shoot everything on blue screen. I mean, we actually built 72 really large sets on the film, but because there's so many different planets, there's always some part of the sequence or the set that has a blue screen on it. I mean, obviously, if you're looking outside Palpatine's office, you can't be looking out onto a real city. Grievous, we waited really to the last, I'd say, 7 months before we really started working on his character. We didn't really know what his voice was like. We didn't know exactly how he was going to seamlessly integrate himself with the rest of the action, but I think he turned out to be a fantastic character.
I like the idea of doing a ray shield, and I like the idea of these guys falling into a very simple trap that you think is a trap, but then later on you realize that they want to get Palpatine, but they also want to get rid of Grievous, and this is sort of the fastest way to get there.
So I love that shot.
This is, I've seen it, and I've seen the film about 9 countries.
People love that bit.
They just love it. This is their favorite moment. Yeah. I mean, within the first half hour of the movie, that's it.
To get this extra personality into R2, zapping the super battle droid got a laugh. It was certainly fun for us. So here we have the first confrontation between Grievous and the Jedi.
With General Grievous, I wanted somebody who was reminiscent, again, of what Anakin is going to become, which is a half man, half robot. In this case, Grievous is sort of 20% alien and 80% robot.
Grievous, to us, was always this sickly character. And so this coughing that he has and this hunched movement that he has, for George at least, referred to sort of how this creature inside this droid wasn't fully working. The systems hadn't been perfected yet.
It echoes what is about to occur with Anakin as a part machine, part life form. We worked on giving him a character for a long time.
Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection.
Tested lots of different actors for the role, and finally I heard a tape by this one actor who was named Alan Smithy, which is the name that directors use when they take their name off a picture. And I liked this voice the best. It turned out to be Matt Wood, the ADR recordist and sound editor, and he did the best performance. I worked to build more character in with him because when we were recording, I happened to have bronchitis, and so we did a few takes where I just sat there and coughed. In that way, we sort of built this more interesting character. To give you a little sense of, the fact that he's in that robot suit for a reason when he was obviously damaged goods. But I didn't want it to be like Darth Vader. I wanted it to be something slightly different. I didn't want to have that sort of artificial breathing. sound. I just wanted to have somebody with asthma.
One of the things I'm really happy about on this film is where we've been able to go with the digital cloth. You'll see that both the Grievous guards and Grievous, of course, in this sequence have clothes. And in this case, they're a very heavy fabric. To me, it adds so much to the movement, to the realism of these characters, and helps blend them, at least in my mind, for the audience to believe in them. The performance and the movement of the animation is one thing, but when you add in the secondary motion, the overlapping action of the cloth, to me, it just breathes all that extra life into the character. But of course, it's the ultimate challenge because we have real actors wearing clothes next to digital characters wearing simulated clothes. We had a brilliant team of cloth sim people on episode 3, led by Juan Luis Sanchez.
I was taking advantage of the fact that we had a set that was built, fully detailed set. So I shot hundreds of reference photographs of this set, and the computer graphic model, it's largely textured from those photographs.
Trying to abandon ship.
One of the big issues behind Grievous was that I didn't want a big, powerful villain. I wanted a cunning, almost cowardly villain who isn't super strong or super powerful, but at the same time, as a good fighter, but not... I didn't want to get somebody bigger and stronger and more powerful than the other villains that we've had and keep, going to the next level. I wanted him to be slightly more like the Emperor, slightly more on the sleazy, behind-the-scenes kind of guy. That's why I set up the fact that he always runs at the end of every fight. He always gets away.
Those graphic display screens are everywhere, and those had to be placed in there in all cases because there was nothing actually on them when we were shooting.
When George first described this scene to me, that's when I knew he was completely insane.
These pre-entry shots were a lot of fun to do. It was kind of a challenge to really make this look good. You have to depict a lot of different altitudes here as well. In the previous pictures we've seen Coruscant from orbit, and we've seen it down at the building level, but this is an opportunity to show views like this.
Steady. Easy, R2.
And like this, that are higher up than we've seen before.
Fire ships on the left and the right.
We'll take you in. Over that.
I love this crash landing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous the way the thing takes the tower. It takes the tower out,
Yeah,
probably killing
3 million people.
No big deal. But I love these shots as well. The way he comes in, tries to put fire out.
Shot when we come right up into the ship is a concept shot, homage to Steve Spielberg. He loves shots like this. I don't usually do them.
Another happy landing.
Now this is one of the first shots that I was involved in.
Which is my favorite map.
Is it?
Well, it's one of my favorite mapping, especially the second half.
Right. The second half is fantastic. Those guys, I think you say did those, but I remember Michael DeComo working on this one, a guy, Michael DeComo, positioning all those ships. Just positioning the ships took him about 6 weeks or something. But this, as we know...
This was the hardest sequence probably in the whole movie to do.
Yeah. Certainly one of my favorites to actually do. Certainly, it's a kind of one of those scenes in the movie that, you don't think too hard about, but putting it together seemed really hard, didn't it?
It was certainly one of the most expensive sequences in the whole film, partly because we're in total sunlight like this, when in reality, if you look at the previous shot, slowly you should see that this ship should actually go in underneath
the sort of the eaves of that thing, into the shadow.
Building into the shadows, and I think that would have helped us a lot.
And you deserve your glorious day with politicians.
This is actually the first real dialogue scene in the movie where you get to get a little of the banter between them and establish their relationship in a more verbal way. Ewan, in each film, kept advancing his accent and his delivery to be a little bit more like Alec Guinness every time so that it would grow into matching into the episode 4. So as he gets older, he gets to be more and more like Alec Guinness.
Part of the problem when you're shooting like this is like, noontime. I mean, this is the most unflattering sun. but it's the one that George really wanted to push and see how far we could take it to. And part of it's just because the light's not very flattering. There aren't a lot of shadows. Everybody's exposed. But this sequence alone here, we reshot once, we added characters in. It was totally re-edited 3 or 4 different times. One to really lay down the groundwork that Grievous was an important character.
I think that's the first, one of the few times you see Jar Jar, isn't it, in the movie? And George's daughters are the two of the characters there. It was one of the first things we started working on, and one of the last things as well.
This was a tricky set because the pillars, if you actually laid them out on a floor plan, they didn't look very good. So we had to move them around in a funny kind of way so they looked good from shot to shot, because this whole set is digital.
These moments are always great because we usually hear about them from George. He'll talk a sequence through. This is, a year, maybe 2 years before we actually begin shooting. We never get a script, or we never get a fully complete script. I think I got one that was more of an outline script 2 days before we started shooting. And when he's talking and he starts going through a sequence, you just see it start to come to life for him.
I'm tired of all this deception. I don't care if they know we're married.
Lincoln, don't say things like that.
Padme's hairdo was done to be slightly reminiscent of her daughter in the next movie, but in a more elegant fashion. Princess Leia's outfit is a little bit more Pancho Villa, Spanish Revolutionary in style, but still with the emphasis on what has commonly been called the earmuff motif. This one actually is a little bit more into the Hopi Indian style, a little bit away from the Mexican style revolutionary woman, but her daughter becomes much more of a revolutionary. That was the style that we used for her, so I've drifted more toward that because her mother is the one that actually starts the Rebel Alliance.
We're not going to worry about anything right now. All right? This is a happy moment. Happiest moment of my life.
We used one of the ships from an earlier episode to establish the Separatists because we didn't want to update the ship too much. We wanted to be able to get the familiarity of the fact that the Trade Federation used pretty much the same ships throughout the episodes. And this one especially has made it become synonymous with the bad guys.
All of these set pieces, this is sort of half miniature, half matte painting, this thing, isn't it? But just getting the scale of the whole to read correctly was a pretty tough thing, I think, for everyone to...
But look at this, what an entrance.
Right.
Just a fantastic shot.
Grievous is very impatient. He doesn't even wait for the ramp to finish extending before he comes out. The reason why Grievous is coughing in all these shots is explained in a Clone Wars cartoon that depicts the action that takes place right before Episode 3 starts. If I remember right, he gets into a confrontation with Mace Windu, who does a force choke to him. That results in him coughing throughout the whole first part of the picture.
And this is really to establish the base on Utapau and that the corporate guilds are there, and also that the Dark Lord of the Sith is still in charge of what's going on around here, and this is still being orchestrated by him.
Soon I will have a new puppet. One more younger and more powerful.
The scene on the balcony of Padme's apartment was actually shot later. Because after I cut the film together, I realized that we didn't really have enough time with them together in a normal situation. Everything after this becomes a little bit more threatening and intense. And I needed something that just showed them in their normal life and focused on their dreams, their hopes and dreams for their future, which really centered around the children, or the child at this point, since they don't know they're twins. As a way of just settling into a normal life before it all starts to fall apart, which it does in the next scene.
I know the perfect spot. Right by the gardens.
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No. No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
So love has blinded you?
Well, that's not exactly what I meant.
That's probably true.
There was a lot of discussion around whether I should actually show one of these dreams, but I felt it was important. We refer to one in the last movie, but since this one centers around Padme, I wanted to bring the audience into the dreamland so that we got a little bit more and a next step up of what's going on with his premonitions.
These Anakin arm shots were a challenge, and in all of the plate photography, we had Hayden just wearing a blue glove with little white tracking marks on it. So then we did very carefully match move this to put the computer-generated mechanical arm in there.
But you see Coruscant so many times, don't you, in so many different ways. Outside the windows, daytime, nighttime. There's so many different variations on that city out there.
Padme's veranda. Now, this is a part of Padme's apartment we've never seen before. George likes to take advantage of parts of sets that haven't been established in previous pictures. If we see it again, do something different with it. In this case, he decided that this part of her bedroom where we had her closet wasn't in fact a closet. It was actually just a little walkway down to the veranda with storage in the walls.
This is a scene that was designed originally to be a little bit more at dawn, but we had so many dawn scenes that I decided that I would make this more night, so we darkened it down quite a bit. And I think it makes it a slightly more ominous scene this way. Something that was really, partly was accomplished when we composited the shots together, and partly was done in the timing itself after the film was finished.
That's a nice little set extension behind Hayden's head. It was just a closed-off blue screen. But just that little painting there gives it such depth and simple painting. No construction, no miniatures, just very beautifully done.
It was only a dream.
I won't let this one become real.
This is a scene that describes the overall plot, the sort of overriding issue of her death and the dilemma they're in because they're not supposed to be married. The sort of domestic crisis that is the underpinning of the whole movie before the Emperor enters into it and turns him to the dark side. But the reason he turns to the dark side is laid out in that scene where they discuss the dilemma of and fear that he has of losing her.
So this is a section of the Jedi Temple we've never seen before. We've actually never seen the base of it. So that's our miniature that we had built for episode 1, but we did modifications to add that entrance.
It gave us a great scene between Yoda and Anakin, and for me it explained a lot of what Anakin was going through, and it used Yoda and his wisdom to help Anakin.
To underline the dilemma that Anakin has of his fear of loss of Padme.
But on an animation level, it gave us this great acting scene. Whenever we have a scene where we're sharing the screen with one other actor, when we have this great voice track provided by Frank Oz, we really enjoyed getting to a level of subtlety on Yoda that we hadn't really achieved yet.
The fear of loss is a path to the dark side.
I won't let these visions come true, Master Yoda.
Death is a natural part of life.
It's fear of losing somebody he loves, which is the flip side of greed. Greed in terms of the Emperor, it's the greed for power, absolute power over everything.
The shadow of greed.
With Anakin, it's really the power to save the one he loves, but it's basically going against the fates and what is natural.
You fear to lose.
But once he thinks he's going to get that power, it begins to occur to them and he could have the power to be the Emperor of the universe, just even more powerful. So once you get a little bit of power, then it leads to wanting more power and more power. The classic power corrupts. Well, this is power corrupts in action. When he goes for something simple, although not too simple, but bringing somebody back from the dead, he realized he could have the power to do anything he wants.
Master Voss has moved his troops to Bospity.
What's wrong, then?
The Senate is expected to vote more executive powers to the Chancellor today.
One of the things that the crews do is just manage all the different assets of the show. And that the assets are the different environments, the different creatures, and you can spend as much time developing a creature or a prop for a scene that lasts 2 shots as you can for something that, you know, is in 50% of the movie. And every one of these creatures and buildings and everything, whether it would be, you know, in the model shop or in CG, they're all designed by somebody, and there's a lot of effort that goes into making them look as real as possible.
Really nice matte painting of Coruscant here. You say Wesky did this. It turned out really well. Now here's another case where George is taking a section of Palpatine's office, which we had seen before in episode 2. And there's a section of it that hadn't been built before, and he's added something to it. So this corridor leading off to the right here, that part of the set hadn't been built before. So now in this picture, we built that part and added this corridor that goes down to his private chamber.
Anakin, I'm appointing you to be my personal representative on the Jedi Council.
Me.
This is a move by Palpatine to begin to cause trouble between Anakin and the Council by putting him on the Council. Palpatine he's inserted himself between the Senate and the Council, because normally the Jedi Council report to the Senate, and as the head of the Senate, that's sort of reporting to him, but not. He just sort of intensifies that situation so that the Jedi Council report directly to him.
This is a particularly beautiful sequence in terms of the matte painting, because just the quality of light, the impending sense of doom. This is the first time that we actually see Anakin not lose it, but we see him beginning to be selfish, beginning to be self-absorbed. And I think the sky, the painting itself reflects, as well as the scene, everything that's starting to produce the turmoil in him.
It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
When I first started making the film, it was during the Vietnam War, and it was during a period when Nixon was going for a 3rd term, or trying to get the Constitution changed to go for a 3rd term. And it got me to thinking about how democracies turn into dictatorships, not how they're taken over, or how there's a coup, or anything like that, but how the democracy turns itself over to a tyrant. And so I went back and I looked at how after the Senate in ancient Rome kills Caesar, they turn around and give the empire over to his nephew and make him emperor. And then at the same time, it's with the French Revolution, after they've gone to all this trouble to have a revolution and get rid of the king and all the people in power, eventually they turn the democracy over to Napoleon and make him the emperor. So it has to do more with a historical precedence, and it does happen a lot, more than one would think. Usually you think that it's one group that takes over. And in the 20th century, it was very much of the banana republic reality where a general takes over, but and does it by force. But it's more interesting when it's actually given over to kind of compensate for the fact that the elected representatives can't agree on anything and are corrupt. And therefore, in order to clean up the mess, somebody is allowed to come in and fix things.
And?
Anakin, I am on your side. I didn't want to put you in this situation.
What situation?
In this particular scene with Obi-Wan and Anakin, we're establishing the fact that there is a tension between the Jedi and Palpatine, the Supreme Chancellor. And that tension between the two of them results in Anakin getting caught in the middle. Palpatine knew this when he put him in the position of being on the Jedi Council, because he knew that the Council would resent it. And Anakin even knew the Council would resent it. But when he's actually put in that position, it begins to create a huge amount of tension, ultimately between the Council and Anakin. And even though Anakin is still loyal to the Council, he's in a tough spot.
And this is classic Star Wars, though, with this very limited set when they walk into the scene, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And just all set extensions. And
this was in fact, this was an afterthought. We decided to move the sequence to an area to kind of show the complexity of the Jedi Temple. It was much more than just the room that we had normally seen. And Gavin was able to put together a few set pieces that exist in a small little staircase. And it becomes a huge, huge monster set.
I always loved the lighting in this sequence, and for me, it was a sequence between these three powerful Master Jedi. And for George, it was also an homage to Seven Samurai, the shot specifically. George had asked us to do that head rub.
The lead samurai in that picture has to shave his head to pretend that he's a monk, and he's constantly sort of rubbing his newly shaved head, and that's where that little affectation for Yoda came from.
That was our little Kurosawa moment for George Lucas. You can see the light refracting through his ear tips in this sequence as well. That glow on the far ear really adds a realism to the skin. And the other thing that the TDs and compositors are doing is adding depth cueing on Yoda. Just like when we shoot our real actors, some of their faces in focus and other parts of them are out of focus. And we've done that with Yoda.
This scene is set up to establish that the pressure that Anakin is under is beginning to divide Anakin and Padme, that she has these values of democracy and how things should be that Anakin is starting to be confused about. You can begin to see Anakin's loyalty is to the Chancellor, not to the Senate, and not necessarily to democracy. And for her to challenge what Palpatine is doing upsets him quite a bit, because it's attacking his friend and his mentor, and he's getting in a state of confusion because of the pressures being put on him from various quarters.
And the Republic has become the very evil we've been fighting to destroy.
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
The thing actually that used to drive me crazy was the traffic outside the window that you constantly see. In order to make the whole process that much more efficient, a lot of tools are developed to allow you to place vehicles, but they were actually developed mainly for nighttime scenes. So every time we had a daytime scene with that traffic, we always struggled a bit with it.
There's some scenes that were cut out where, from this point on, we begin to see Padme become involved in the Rebel Alliance. And there's scenes with her and Mon Mothma and Bail Organa where they begin to start the Rebel Alliance, which is really a way of them forming a group in the Senate to counter what is going on with the Chancellor. The scene at the opera here, it was fun to be able to do a large scene with everybody dressed up. I put my two daughters in the hallway, and they said they wouldn't do it unless I was in the scene with them. So I ended up with a blue face standing talking to my younger daughter while my oldest daughter is in the center talking to her boyfriend.
I was very happy to see him finally get into one of the films.
See that fellow wearing the mushroom in the middle box over there on his head? That would be me.
My fourth and final cameo here. The producers and supervisors box. Roger and Rob and I and Janet and Jill and Denise are all there in the box watching the show.
All the producers. Everyone's in the different boxes as
Absolutely.
You go back there. All the compositing supervisors and CG supervisors.
This scene was originally written to be in Palpatine's office, and I'd already done 4 scenes in the office. And to do another scene with him just sitting down in the office talking just wasn't going to hold together.
And then George came up with the idea of, well, what about, an event? And by 10 o'clock that night, we had really settled on the opera. The opera was going to be Das Squid. It would be in Palpatine's opera box.
I got the art department to give me some chairs, to build some chairs for me overnight, literally. And then we put him on some blue platforms, and I called up ILM, and we started designing this, what we call the water ballet. We call it Squid Lake, done by the Mon Calamari dancers, because it's Admiral Akbar's home planet ballet troupe.
I remember being on set in Sydney when George and Rick came to me with a very sort of devilish smile on each of their faces. And they told me that they had added what they called Squid Lake into the movie. Quite honestly, I thought he was joking. I didn't really take him seriously until I started to see artwork coming from Skywalker Ranch while we were still shooting the movie. It took a number of months for us to come to the design of what this would look like. This zero gravity balls of water floating in a theater space. The art directors designed the ballet dancers with these long streamers
There's two real seduction scenes here, and this is one of them, and it's a very long scene, and it needs to play out in a very methodical way, which is very un-Star Wars-like. By getting in a new environment, I think it adds enough interest to make you focus on the dialogue and on what's going on without getting bored.
It's such a creepy little scene. It's just so bold and so audacious to put it in this kind of setting and having this weird blob in front of you, music playing, and all of this really essential information in terms of the origins of Anakin, Palpatine's overriding unbelievable confession of not only how he came to power, but also of this crucial element that is the hook that finally drags Anakin down.
I love Ian in this scene. Ian actually had laryngitis this day and could barely talk. But he managed to get through the day. It was, losing his voice, and we were going through the scene, and it actually gave him an interesting voice quality that is unique to this particular scene. And we did not loop this scene. I kept it originally because I really liked the way it plays out.
I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
The political intrigue that's going on through all the movies, or at least the first three, is fairly opaque in the first two. And it has to do with commercial interests and corporate reality and the machinations of the Senate, and it's also Palpatine's rise from just a senator to a chancellor, and then now from a chancellor to an emperor. And so the political machinations are meant to be kind of political, which is you don't quite understand what's going on or what the issues are, but now I think when you see where it all leads to,
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
What's going on in the first two films is much more apparent because it's really designed to set this scene up where we spill the beans about what's going on politically. But it's been built up through the whole thing, and you'll see in 4, 5, and 6, the other movies, there's remnants of this political situation that are also in those films. So it's a complete circle, and it runs throughout the whole thing, which gives you the sense of where things are going to go after, episode 6, which is that the Senate will come back and it'll become a democracy again, because now we know what a democracy was when it started, which was really in episode 1, even though it was not very effective because of the corruption and the petty fighting.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
So now we move on to Kashyyyk, the homeworld of the Wookiees. The idea was that the Wookiee craft were designed after actual creatures that lived on their world. The catamarans themselves are actually big teak and wooden ships with these dragonfly wings on the top, but they're actually mechanized.
What we did with this was because there were so many effect shots, in an effort to try and stop wasting so much time on a lot of these paintings, we decided we'd go out and shoot in Thailand, China, Switzerland, Tunisia, trying to get as much background information, plate information that we could for all the guys. This was the first place that Roger was thrown into. He had to rush to China.
The other aspect of this is that it begins to set up even further the hologram transmissions about how these guys have meetings, but some of them are holograms and some are not. This time I did it from the other side. Normally you just see the Jedi Temple with a few holograms in there. Now you get to see it from Yoda's side.
I couldn't believe that you'd actually swallowed the bait when I said it was just an easy little
moment.
Little moment in the film.
Yeah, this really is quite a complicated scene. In terms of the pieces that we use. I think I ended up spending about 3 or so weeks in China, photographing all of the mountains there in the background. Even the water. Craig Hammock was the CG supervisor in charge of that sequence, but we did a lot of the water actually on the computer, but some of it we did over in the East Bay, over near Oakland in California. I think the thing that excited me most about it was just this idea of having this kind of D-Day landing going on there. And then this is just this combination of real and CG Wookiees that was just a killer scene to get to work on, but I think kind of worked in the end. The really big tree is actually a miniature, but shots like this, where you're just seeing so much going on, there's just so much work that goes into it. It's just an incredible amount of work that goes into just putting these scenes together. But we did so much of the work in CG in terms of the water, just because of the level of interaction you needed for the crashing tank droid.
You're gonna need me on this one, Master.
Oh, I agree. However, it may turn out just to be a wild panther chase.
Master, I've disappointed you.
This is the last scene in the movie with Obi-Wan and Anakin where they're still friends. I wanted it this one time to sort of have this overhanging reality of the fact that their relationship has been strained, that Anakin is trying to repair it, that Obi-Wan is a very strong central figure. He's the rock, and he doesn't get upset in the same emotional way that Anakin does, and is able to repair it and try to caution for calm and thoughtful response to things.
Be patient, Anakin. It will not be long before the Council makes you a Jedi Master.
But there's also, at the end of this, we begin to see that while Anakin appears that he feels good about the relationship, he really doesn't. He's worried about what they think of him, and we'll see in the next scene after this that he's concerned about his motivations for things and his confusion and upset the fact that Council and Obi-Wan don't trust him.
This is a great shot. I love that. I remember when you showed me this the first time, just adding the camera shake.
Well, what we've done in some of these scenes is that we put a little bit of reality into it, which is a ship that big going by would shake the camera a bit, and it gives you a heightened sense of reality.
For this film, George wanted to see the clones without their helmets on. So Tamura Morrison, the actor, was shot wearing a blue suit, and then very carefully we matched in digital costumes.
But this is really designed to set up the reality of the clones, which we hinted at in the very beginning of the movie, but this is the one to really establish the fact that all the guys in those suits are all the same guy. They're all basically Jango Fett or clones of Jango Fett, so that you don't get confused about the fact that the same guy is all over the place.
The idea was that not all the clones are the same age. They're all the same genetic makeup, but some of them are 35 years old, some of them are 25 years old, some of them are 20 years old. So although they're clones, they're not exactly the same because they're of different ages.
Don't give up, Padme.
An amusing thing here. See how Anakin's hand is down and then comes up? Originally, it was in the up position all the way through, and George decided he didn't want it to look like he was staring at this monitor there. So George decided that his hand should be down as though he's sort of lost in thought. So he cut off his hand and rotated it around.
Because Anakin has been having some difficulty with Obi-Wan, this is to begin to set up that his nightmare about Padme also begins to involve Obi-Wan, and that there's some jealousy between him and Obi-Wan about Padme, and he senses that Obi-Wan has been there to talk to her, and he's struggling with his confusion of the fact that he's, in essence, emotionally imbalanced at this point. He is confused by Palpatine. He's confused by the Council. He's confused because he doesn't want to lose Padme.
I want more. And I know I shouldn't.
He thinks he's figured out a way to get new powers that could maybe save her life. But he knows, in essence, that's probably wrong. So there's a lot of mixed feelings in this whole scene here. It's also one of the few sets that we built, and it was built exactly as the set in the other movies to establish her home apartment.
I promise you.
No, I promise you.
There's definitely what I really liked about the whole movie, though, was just the amount of darkness in it.
Yeah,
you know?
Me too. And I wish, in many ways, it had almost been a completely dark film. Love to have had every single moment, at least on Coruscant, everything to do with Anakin, either happening at night or in the shadows.
So this is a shot of Obi-Wan arriving on Utapau, which is our sinkhole world. The design of these platforms in the city is amazing to me. I know the designers, Ryan Church and Eric Tiemens, used fossils and bone. They wanted a much more organic feel to this planet. Challenge, of course, is always trying to design very unique, different kinds of planets.
This is one of my favorite characters. This was all done with makeup. It's a great design for a character and also a costume.
This is Bruce Spence, who's a wonderful Australian actor who was the Mad Max 2, played the kind of wacky helicopter pilot. He's just a consummate actor, just arrived on set with this whole understanding of who he was and kind of feel like you know who these people are who live on Utapau.
We wanted to have these creatures in this world be a little bit different, but not so much so that it was, the cliched aliens. The little guys that work on the ship are one of my favorites. They used to work with the dragons. We had a scene with the dragons, but we cut it out, and I decided I wanted to keep those guys in, so I moved them over to work on this platform.
The idea is that all of the citizens of this world live on the walls of these enormous sinkholes that go into their planet. The idea specifically was that the lizards that we see on this planet are actually native to this world, and that they have evolved to be able to crawl and clamber up the walls of these sinkholes.
Every time you have a thing like this, you have to come up with a culture and how that culture functions and what their aesthetic is.
But when we introduce the droids, and specifically Grievous's unicycle later on, you'll see that they tear apart at the world, that they're not part of this world, and that they don't coexist with this nature very well.
There was a lot more in this film with Boga, the giant lizard, but again, it was one of those things where we got so infatuated with a little offshoot of an idea that the story gets lost, and we have to sort of rein ourselves in and focus on the story and slow down on having a good time. And I'd always wanted to do an actual sequence with a Jedi riding an animal other than a Tauntaun, which was not really a Jedi. I wanted to do it with a Jedi with a sword and the whole medieval look and feel to it, and this was my chance to do that.
It won't be long before the armies of the Republic track us here.
Here we are inside of level 10. This is the first time we've ever really seen what the inside of a core ball looks like.
Especially the score in this area. Johnny Williams' music really adds a certain bizarre quality to the way this whole thing works, because it's a theme we're really familiar with, but it's done sort of in minor chords and with a different, arrangement, and it really is a kind of eerie, nice feel to this whole sequence as he sneaks up on General Grievous.
I have doubts about your ability to keep us safe. Be thankful, Viceroy. You have not found yourself in my life. Your gift is waiting.
Most of the animators on my team wanted to work on this level 10 fight, this battle between Grievous and Obi-Wan. Reason being is, most of them are kids inside, truthfully, and, anytime we can do a big action sequence, they're all over it.
Hello there.
This, when he jumps down into the room and says, "Hello there," is a direct appropriation of the line where Alec Guinness first comes in the movie and sees R2 and says, "Hello there." So we wanted to do that one little tip to where we were going with the character and with Alec Guinness.
We get to see Obi-Wan, we get to see him taking on this huge number of droids, and he just dispatches them this quickly. And we can also see the more ruthless side of him, where he's kind of fed up with Grievous and all these droids.
I remember originally thinking that this felt like a very cruel moment there, when it decapitates the guy, but actually the guy is clearly trying to reach for the weapon so that he had to do it.
And originally this reveal of the 4 arms was to be kept completely secret until the movie came out. But I know it did make it out before the movie was released. But for us, we were sworn to secrecy when Grievous was to split into the 4 arms.
We're always looking for something unique with these villains. And even though he's a kind of slimy villain who runs, we wanted to give him some kind of extra feature. And the idea of his hands coming apart and having 4 laser swords instead of a double laser sword or some of the other opponents we've had seemed like a really fun idea.
So General Grievous has 4 lightsabers here, which makes a big choreography challenge.
Glenn McIntosh, the lead animator on this sequence, worked with Steve Nichols on this spinning blade sequence. George had described it as the moving propellers of a plane coming at Obi-Wan.
The trick part of this, it was very hard to shoot because we have a stuntman being General Grievous, but obviously he only had 2 hands, and to develop a way of fighting where actually Ewan had to learn how to do this thing, and the stuntman did one section of one hand and the other section of the other hands to kind of give him a sense and an idea what it'd be like to fight somebody with 4 hands, 4 things. But it's still a kind of tricky maneuver. We We did end up cutting the extra 2 swords off pretty quickly in the sequence.
For the shot of the clones coming down on their wires, I felt strongly we needed to do that with motion capture. So we had a rig built at ILM and lowered an actor down on that, so we got all of the real gravity and weight to the movement of those clones.
So we looked for opportunities on Grievous to show that he was not just a robot, that he's actually an alien that was presumably horribly injured. And he's in a big life support system, kind of like what Darth Vader becomes.
We're now coming up to what George Lucas describes as the most perverse shot that we've ever animated. This one here, which was animated by Delio Tramontazzi. Delio and Glenn really got into the scorpion movement of Grievous. It's always a treat when we can surprise the audience, when they think that they know a character and then we pull something out of our hat.
One of the larger parts of this sequence was Obi-Wan on a lizard chasing Grievous on a mechanical scooter. And when Steve Spielberg was bored, I let him storyboard some of these sequences.
And we sent Dan Gregoire, our animatic supervisor, to New York, and they came up with this outrageous chase sequence that it was about 40 minutes long. It was just magnificent. I mean, it was like a whole separate movie.
But it just didn't make sense to go off on an edge and shoot it when there's still the story of Anakin and Palpatine to deal with. We had this running gag of Obi-Wan constantly reminding Anakin throughout these things of not losing his lightsaber, and methodically through all these films, the Jedi have an interesting way of losing their lightsabers, which is kind of a running gag.
May I interrupt? General Kenobi has made contact with General Grievous.
I love Sam Jackson in this scene. He carries such force with him in his scenes. This is a very short little scene that shows the direction that the Jedi are going, that the Chancellor is, or the Emperor is anticipating, and uses really to seduce, ultimately, Anakin in the next scene.
I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. The dark side of the Force surrounds the Chancellor.
If he does not give up his emergency powers after the destruction of Grievous, then he should be removed from office.
The Jedi Council would have to take control of the Senate in order to secure a peaceful transition.
Great dark haste this line of thought will carry us. There we must take.
George changed the dialogue in this scene from when we shot it originally.
Chancellor, we've just received a report from Master Kenobi. He has engaged
A couple of these shots, Anakin shot against a blue screen, and it's composite against photographs, still photographs that I shot from our original shoot.
The really interesting way that George works is, you know, he doesn't sit down with you and become specific. He says, I see this, which is just the starting point. And that process keeps on going, not for a year, not for 2 years, but for through a whole duration, 3.5 years, in the whole process of making the picture from conceptual design to the final moment where, you know, the release schedule just hits us in the face and we can't work any longer. It's so wonderful to see it because he just adds layers and layers and layers to each shot over the course of the years that go by. And then when you look back and you go back to the original source material, you can't believe how far it's moved and changed. And that's the way he loves to work. He wants to sit in that editing room and just dream.
The background here is from our original shoot in Sydney. As a precaution, we did shoot some empty plates. So this shot here was done during the pickups as well, with no set. And this mural that's on the wall was added later. Originally, there was just sort of a textured pattern inside these panels, but George decided the day of the shoot that he wanted to put something, you know, more interesting in there, and he had the textured panels pulled out, and we just put blue screen in there. And then later, art department designed this nice sculpted frieze. It was actually a clay sculpture that was done by Richard Miller and Eric Timmons.
The Jedi, Anakin. Only through me can you achieve a power greater than any Jedi.
Originally, this was written where Anakin was actually seduced in this scene, and he became the Sith pretty much in this scene. At the end, in this one, when faced with the reality, he stays a Jedi, and he says, I'll get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to turn you in. But originally, it wasn't like that. It was, he kind of got more sucked into the idea of becoming a Sith Lord and saving his wife. And it just didn't play that well in terms of how fast he converted. So it seemed to make a lot more sense to have him stay loyal to the Jedi as long as possible, which meant later on in the scene with the fight with Mace, we redid that scene. And at first, there wasn't the part where the Emperor gives up and says, "Oh, you got me, you got me." It was basically the scene without that, where it just gets more intense, and then finally Anakin breaks down and saves him. But it didn't have the same thing as that pause in there where you think that and it also makes the Emperor a lot more slimy. It's really fun. It's a fun, dramatic thing to deal with.
So this shot here with the rack focus going from Palpatine to Anakin were originally two separate shots, and we put them together into one shot with the rack.
But you're not sure of their intentions, are you?
I will quickly discover the truth of all this.
You have great wisdom, Anakin. Know the power of the dark side. Power to save badly.
Here we are in the Utapau main plaza. Obi-Wan riding a creature. These shots are always really difficult to do. Anytime you have a live-action character riding some CG creature. The plan was to animate the walk and run cycles of the creature, and then be able to take that animation and play it back on a flight simulator gimbal so that we could get good motion on the saddle. But the schedule changed and it became impossible to do that. So we did it the same way we did it on episodes 1 and 2, where the motion of the creature has to be fit to the motion of the blue screen.
Once I got rid of Obi-Wan's sword, I thought it'd be funny for Obi-Wan to use the staff and ultimately use the gun, the weapon that most Jedi sustain the most to kill the villain, the least likely weapon for him to end up destroying Grievous with.
Jamie Wheelis and his team worked on this sequence with Grievous, hand-to-hand fighting with Obi-Wan. I love it when we can get a shot like this, where we've got a live actor holding on to a digital character. For me, it helps the illusion of having a digital character interacting with a live actor. Here we've got a digital character grabbing onto a real person, and we've done vice versa as well in this. And to me, if we do it right, the audience just believes that both of these characters are alive and interacting at the same time.
Mostly this was a play on a Jedi with a gun, which you don't ever see anywhere else.
The idea here is that Grievous's internals are all kind of volatile, and like his internal organs are very flammable. So this idea of getting shot and then kind of burning up from the inside, that was kind of fun to execute.
This is actually a blend of a computer-generated character with real fire elements. They built what we call a mandrel, which is it roughly is the shape of the digital character. But then that's real fire, and they're compositing that together with a digital character. And to me, it just looks absolutely real.
So this is one of my moments as well where I thought maybe I'd pushed it a bit too far, the old darkness.
No, I loved it.
But,
it's such a great moment. But you just see and hear the quality of the artistry in terms of the light, the shadows.
Yeah, and my little go at having these weird laser lines across across the landing platform there, which I could never justify, but I figured they kind of looked pretty cool.
It's a great set. You know, as a producer or effects supervisor, how do we maximize what money we have to create the largest, biggest context of something that we could never in a million years afford to build? And this is where I really truly believe is the future of this kind of filmmaking for large scale films like this.
If what you've told me is true, you will have gained my trust.
This was another scene that was added after I changed that scene in the office, because once I had Anakin say that he was going to go tell the Jedi, I actually had to shoot a scene of him going and telling the Jedi. There was a lot of good factors that happened when I changed that. It strengthens a scene when Mace comes in. I mean, it meant that when Mace entered the room with Palpatine, he knew that he was a Sith Lord. It works actually much better that when he comes through that door, he knows that he's going to arrest him. He knows that he's the bad guy, which works a lot better. After this scene, I needed something that sort of remind people that the real issue here is trying to save Padme. and that's what his conflict is, and that's why he's emotionally going back and forth. And it's very easy to have the audience believe that Anakin is miffed because he doesn't get to go on the mission, that he's angry because he's not a master. And this scene is really designed to remind you that his real problem is that he just doesn't want to lose her, and he knows that if the Emperor is killed, then any chance he has of saving her is going to be gone. The Emperor is his only hope to saving her, which obviously drives him back to the Emperor's office.
I really love this scene, though. Just, no dialogue. Again, perfect classic George. What can you do? How can you relay something just visually without using dialogue? Very simple moment, but very powerful. He knows that he will now do anything.
But it wasn't really until I cut it all together and looked at it that I said, okay, now I can see what the problem is and how to solve it. Then I added this thing where he goes back to the Jedi Temple and comes back to the office rather than staying there. I needed something that was just about them. And at this point, as I laid the movie out, it was very clear that we needed to be reminded why Anakin was turning, although it was put in there very strongly. It wasn't strong enough.
You're living in this vacuum for so long, and the amazing awe of being able to sit down in a room and watch this other part of the filmmaking process just enchant you with these extraordinary images of things that were essentially just blue screen. We were gobsmacked every time we saw something new.
Going into this fight sequence between Palpatine and Mace Windu, we knew that we were going to be doing a number of digital head replacements. But he's the first to admit he's not a stuntman or a swordsman. We did have a very talented swordsman on set and actually fighting with Sam Jackson. Nick Gillard, of course, had choreographed everything in this fight. But there were a number of shots that we knew right from the outset that were going to be digital, including this shot here and this shot here. When Palpatine leaped from behind the desk, it was just necessary for us to do entire digital Palpatine. It's the technology we've been using for a number of years, but what we're happy with now is that we can replicate human skin a lot more successfully.
There's a great deal of work put in on these sword fights because there's so many of them that we had to make each one individual. Each one have its own personality that reflected the two opponents and their skills and how they would adjust. The sword fight between Palpatine and Mace is different than the one between the Emperor and Yoda, even though I wanted to have sort of similarities but make them different enough to where they don't get incredibly repetitious. This has got more sword fighting in it than all the other movies put together.
What we find is that it's very challenging, or was very challenging, to generate realistic-looking hair and skin. And so the very talented shader writers at ILM started working on the problem a couple years back. And Episode 3 really, for me, is one of the first shows where we've been able to use that new technology and apply it to a sequence like this, where we can take an actor's head, replicate it almost exactly inside the computer, and then match it into his movement.
This shot where Anakin walks through that little antechamber is one of my favorite shots because the whole thing is a matte painting. Okay, well, this sequence always started out with Mace overpowering Palpatine, and then Palpatine using his powers to try to destroy Mace, and Mace deflecting his rays with his lightsaber. And it always was that Anakin cut the lightsaber out of his hand. But this part where he pretends to lose his power and be weak was something that I added later. Because it moved the point where Anakin turns down to this moment right here. And you can see that it's very clear that he wants him to go on trial so he can pump him for information about how to get these powers.
Now, these close-up shots where Palpatine's getting the Force lightning reflected back and he's getting zapped, and the strain of all this exertion is what's transforming him into the Emperor that we see later in Return of the Jedi. These are computer-generated shots of his head. They're carefully matched to the performance that Ian was doing, but we needed to make them computer graphics so that we could do the transition.
But George wanted to see the transition over a number of shots. So what you're going to see here over about 4 to 6 shots is the transition, and we're actually doing a digital head replacement, and we're blending between two face shapes. So we start with predominantly Palpatine, and then we move more closely to Sidious. And the compositors are using his eyes and his teeth from the real actor, so that we have some realism in there, and then all of the skin is actually animated.
So if you look carefully, see here, we're lighting up Mesa's skeleton from all the zapping. Bit of an homage to Return of the Jedi.
Sam Jackson wanted a very spectacular death. That was the only thing he requested of in a purple laser sword. So it was an easy thing to do in the nature of this, the way the sequence works, but it was very involved. He just didn't want to be killed in the dead of night, stabbed in the back or something.
By this point, we're now back to full Sidious makeup. So there's no digital enhancement at this point. So this is real makeup, no digital.
You're fulfilling your destiny, Anakin. Become my apprentice. Learn to use the dark side of the Force.
I will do whatever you ask.
In this sequence, we lowered the Emperor's voice to make this transition stronger and to make it creepier. Because now that he comes back and he's all looking weird, we wanted him to sound weird also. And then we very slowly take him back to his normal Emperor voice, which is a little bit different than his Palpatine voice. But that's more of an acting thing. This is actually, technically, we added a little reverb and made it sound a little creepier. Because we wanted this scene to have a little extra creepiness, because it is Rise Lord Vader is, again, one of those key moments in the movie that you want to have a little bit more theatrical than anything else.
So all these shots of Palpatine, there's a little manipulation going on with the eyes. Just makes him a little creepier and spookier, this really subtle glow to his eyes.
This is where he makes the pact with the devil. This is the very Faustian pact of trying to do something that he shouldn't be doing. He's gone over the line. The killing of Mace, he was trying to stop him from killing Palpatine, which in essence was the right thing to do. He didn't realize that Palpatine was going to kill him. So up to that point, he was trying to do the right thing. But now he realizes, by having Mace be dead, that he's crossed over the line, and that he sort of succumbs and says, yes, I'll do anything you ask if you allow me to keep my wife alive.
This shot here was actually pretty difficult for us to do. It was really just finding the right tone. I remember talking to George a number of times about what is he feeling? Does it feel like a heart attack? Is he having a migraine? And we went back and forth a number of times, and then we were able to get to the right feel for Yoda. We know about the disturbance of the Force, and this, of course, is this huge rift that's happening here as Anakin turns from good to bad.
Then he says, okay, well, now I'll do that, but now you have to go and do all these things. You have to go kill all the Jedi, because if you don't kill all the Jedi, even if you leave one alive, even if it's one of the little kids, they'll come back and get us, and we'll be dealing with this forever. So none of them can survive. The same thing with the Sith. The issue with the Sith is there's always two Sith, but until you've gotten rid of both of them, you haven't gotten rid of any of them, because they can always create more of them. So you have to get rid of the Emperor and his apprentice.
Civil war without end. First, I want you to go to the Jedi Temple.
One of the issues in all of this is that the bad guys think they're good, and Lord Sidious thinks he's bringing peace to the galaxy because there's so much corruption and confusion, chaos going on. And that now he's going to be able to straighten everything out, which may be true, but the price the galaxy is going to have to pay for it is way too much.
After you have killed all the Jedi in the temple, go to the Mustafar system, wipe out Viceroy Gunray and the other separatist leaders. Once more, the Sith will rule the galaxy.
The telling of this story of Anakin going into the Jedi Temple and the other Jedi getting killed through the Order 66 of the clones is just done as kind of one of those inevitable payoffs in terms of getting rid of everybody. The Emperor that's getting rid of all his enemies. But there's a certain inevitability about it all, and a sadness to it. I was always worried in episode 2 that I was giving away too much in terms of people asking questions about where did the clones really come from. Because if you go back, they mention the fact that Lord Tyrannus and Count Dooku are the same person, Darth Tyrannus, and that Darth Tyrannus is the one who started the clones. So if you're paying attention, it's very easy to figure out what's going to happen to the clones. I mean, if they're going to be the ones that betray everybody. Tough to put in things like that without giving everything away.
We've got a lot of motion capture here. This time, however, what we did was we put a performer who was actually an ex-Navy SEAL in the suit, and so we got much more realistic movement. George had sort of told me after episode 2 that he could tell it was a bunch of animators running around as clones last time, and he wanted more realistic motion. So our attempt to deal with that was to actually have someone who had military training.
So here we are entering the Order 66 sequence, where we have little vignettes on multiple worlds where the clones turn on the Jedi. So originally there was a whole question about should there be a hologram inside a hologram. So in the hologram of Cody with his hand out, should there be another little Palpatine there? And we did a version like that, and then George decided, no, it's better if it doesn't retransmit.
This is a little one-off moment here in the movie where we visit this planet here for what, a sequence of shots, 4 or 5 shots here. The idea being that it's just this ash-ridden planet, and it's the beginning of the sort of Order 66 sequence, isn't it?
Yeah, this to me is really the turning point for the movie. The last hour, I just think is almost perfect. There's just so much going on, so many interesting themes being not only developed, but taken to their final conclusion.
This is my favorite planet. So when we finally got a chance to create a completely otherworldly environment, usually it's based on some kind of reality, but this one we went out a little bit further, a little more fantasy-like, which I enjoyed. It's always a little tricky to do that without making it look dated and funny and weird. But I think we managed to pull it off for a very brief moment there.
So whenever we have something interacting where we need to see it bouncing like Yoda's cane, we'll do that as a rigid body simulation. Think of it as a mathematical program that actually understands weight and gravity and mass. We can apply that to the cane or a ship, like we're going to do a simulation right here when the ship smashes around. We can then simulate all of these explosions.
There's just so much work in just pulling all these different planets together. This was the sort of metallic hanging cities that we built for this little moment. That's actually Nina, one of the coordinators, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Did a great job.
Such a wonderful, beautiful face. And
did a great little job of doing that little moment there.
One of my favorite Wookiee fighting shots. I love the fact that they're flying around on those things and the wind is blowing.
There's a shot coming up here where Chewbacca picks up Yoda. I was on stage when George was shooting Peter Mayhew in the suit, and he kind of came over to me and said, well, Chewie's going to pick up Yoda now. And I immediately thought about, well, how do we get Yoda interact with the fur on Chewbacca? It's a very difficult thing. But on the day, if you'd been with us, he just had Chewie pick up a bag of, I think it was like a bag of corn or a bag of flour, and then hoist that up onto his shoulder. Later on, we replaced that bag with our little digital Yoda.
Essentially, the 2 Wookiees are the only real thing in the play. Everything else is some kind of miniature or CG element in that environment.
The thing with the kids was very necessary to establish how far down the road he'd come to do something that this brutal and barbaric. And it had to be in there, but I definitely didn't want to show it. It was really in the editorial process that the idea of intercutting her with him at that moment where he's at his very worst with her worrying about him. That juxtaposition works quite well because it reflects as much on the slaughter of the children as it does on her concern about him even though she doesn't know that the children are being slaughtered. Yeah, but it gives you this very strong emotional connection when those two sequences are pushed up against each other. This actually is one of my favorite digital scenes. All these troopers are digital. The acting in it, so good. So realistic. Just the little moves and still the nuance of it is fantastic.
The young Jedi on this platform is George's son, who in the first shot is digital and for the rest he's live action.
This is my son, who was still a little boy when he did this, and now he's 6 feet tall 2 years later.
Stage 2 at Fox Studios in Sydney actually has a tank below the main shooting floor, and that tank was used for Obi-Wan swimming underwater to come to that wall. So that's actually Ewan shot in the tank in Sydney.
There's a real art to doing wipes. You really have to be very careful about what is the story elements that you're telling, so that the transition could be very soft or very hard, and then what are the two shots that you're going from and to, so that the graphics of the shots play into the wipe.
I loved it that we got to work on these walkers, and I had the animators go back and very specifically look at what Phil Tippett and his team had done with the original walkers from the original films.
I wanted to add this little scene in of Yoda saying goodbye to the Wookiees, give the Wookiees a chance to also have some scene other than battle in the movie where we got to know him, and also acknowledge that it is Chewbacca.
Miss you, I will.
It's mostly just to give recognition to Chewbacca and let the Wookiees have a little bit of a dialogue scene together. One can now assume that the Wookiees all leave the planet and go off and find mercenary jobs throughout the galaxy, being co-pilots in smuggler ships and things like that.
Stella Bow and Pat Tubak and all those guys did a great job of putting all that together. And here's another one of our big landing platform moments. The nighttime look.
It's interesting, this set in a lot of the screenings has gotten a huge reaction, and at first I didn't know what they were reacting to, but then I realized it was the set. As we go on, you'll see that the set really establishes the beginning of the next movie. The last dialogue in this movie is R2 and 3PO, and they're in the same location as they are at the beginning of the next film when they have the first dialogue.
Luckily, Obi-Wan knows where there's an unused vehicle standing by. I like the design. It's a very sort of aggressive look.
It's actually one of the shots coming up always makes me laugh, because we just did so many different variations on this shot. That one there, with the lens flare. Just the arrangement of the planets. And I think it's one of those moments where we wanted to do something kind of different for that moment that you hadn't seen in any of the environments. But of course, so many environments have been done that it's difficult to think of something completely original. But, it was fairly simple in the end, at Flare with those planets in the background.
So C-3PO going down the steps there was computer generated because it's impossible for Anthony to go downstairs in the suit because the legs aren't flexible enough.
He has a very unique way of moving, and although we thought we had what we needed when we motion captured a performer doing the actions, when I actually analyzed it, when we actually put the shots together, to me they never looked like Anthony. So I guess I'm giving that up to the audience right now. Hopefully you guys didn't think that when you saw the shots.
This is where we move into a bit of a montage. The scenes in this section of the movie, after the scene here with Padme and Anakin, start to move pretty quickly. A lot of very short scenes. It's very hard to write this sort of thing. You really have to see it on the screen to see how you intermix the scenes and how you intercut them to get the maximum emotional impact. And I like this scene because he's lying to her and he's rationalizing it at the same time. By saying he's doing it all for her. He's loyal to the Senate and Chancellor and her. But in the end, I mean, he's twisted every fact to his own rationale to make it seem like it's okay. But in the process of lying to her, he's actually just lying to himself and rationalizing his behavior. Because he knows he's wrong, but he won't admit it. For me, this is a scene that says that she could never fall in love with him. She's obviously in love with him, but she could never live with him. Because he's too far gone that he could murder a bunch of kids and then go and rationalize it to her as just doing his job.
My lady, is there anything I might do?
No, thank you, Tripia.
Oh. I feel so helpless.
So pale ship in space here. It was really fun to be on this set because it was a recreation of this, very famous opening moment from episode 4. This ship is meant to be either the same ship that we see later in episode 4, or it's meant to be a ship that's just like it, from the same assembly line. And this is the famous corridor at the beginning where the stormtroopers blast through that door and come in. This was a reconstruction of the original set, sort of very faithfully remade from photographs. It was all kind of matched by eye.
It was an eerie experience working on this set because it's like Tatooine. It's one of those, such an iconic set that it's like being thrown back in time 30 years.
I was worried that we were going to have Yoda just moving too quickly. So on the day, they actually had a small person do the rehearsal with Ewan and Jimmy so that we could get the pacing right. Virginia, the animator on this shot, did just a great job, and she knocked it out in a couple of days.
I must say the animation on Yoda this time has reached a whole nother level in this film.
And a little more knowledge might light our way.
Here we are in Mustafar. I knew I had to have a volcanic planet, and I knew I had to have a society there, and that they'd be sort of capturing energy, but I didn't quite know what the energy would be or how they would do it. So there was a fair amount of time spent trying to solve just technical problems on this planet. What is the culture like? How does it work? How do they make their living? What do they get paid for? What is their purpose there?
So on this planet of Mustafar, this volcano planet, we knew from discussions with George that the citizens here are mining the lava for some kind of material that's in the lava, whether it be minerals or some other kind of precious metal, that they're collecting the lava, they're sampling the lava, and they're taking it to the refinery. And so when we created the actions, we were very specifically thinking about that and the kind of movement and droid actions that would be there.
They collect energy. That's what I decided they would be doing here. And those arms are collectors. And then they would also collect heat. They collect the lava, and they process the lava and test it, things like that. But the primary issue here is collecting the energy. Behind everything in the movie, there has to be a reason and a logic and a culture. And then all the design work goes on around that culture. And the language and the costumes and the vehicles, everything sort of flows from that original concept of what is the culture? What kind of a culture are they? What is their mores? And, there's two very different cultures in this movie. One is Mustafar and the other is Utapau. And they have a very different philosophy about life.
R2, stay with the ship.
In episode 4, I had Chewbacca yelling at a little mouse droid, and so I decided to do a little tip of the hat to that sequence by having these little baby mice droid being afraid of Anakin as he comes into the control room here.
One of the things I really like that George does is that he treats the digital characters like they were actors on the set. You'll see a number of shots where it's just Yoda's reaction, listening to people. Because he would normally shoot that way with real actors. He doesn't cut around them. He doesn't cut to them specifically. You'll see shots where they're partly in frame and partly out of focus, and they're just hopefully just paying attention and interacting like any actor would in any particular scene.
This shot of Yoda as he puts his sword away is we went over and over and over that to get the right expression on his face because it's a fairly important moment, and there was self-satisfaction, and there was worry, and then there was, kind of too much strength, and get just the right feel about how he's approaching all this. That was a very tough, seemingly very simple thing to do, but a very tough thing to actually pull off.
Not even the younglings survived.
This is one of those sequences where we really needed to hit a very specific emotional beat for Yoda. I didn't want it to be over the top. I didn't want it to be ham-handed. I wanted it to be subtle, and I wanted it to be sensitive to what we're seeing here. And I think we hit the right feel, the right weight, the right expressions on his face. I'm very pleased with where we've been able to get with Yoda in terms of the subtlety of the performance. We've pulled back a little bit in terms of how much we move the face, and I think it's really helped us in terms of our acting.
This is a piece that's a little bit of a tip to The Godfather. This is where, in The Godfather, he's doing the christening of the baby, and at the same time, killing all of his enemies. And that's kind of what's going on here, is the emperor is declaring the empire. At the same time, he's wiping out the last of his allies, really, contrasting those two events against each other, which always works. It's nice to be able to have one guy doing something rather benign and the other one being very physical and active in terms of the real horror of this situation, the real awful part of the situation is him declaring the empire. As contrasted to Anakin, who's actually wiping everybody out, cutting people in half, and doing really terrible things. But it's not nearly as terrible as what the Emperor is doing. And he's just doing it with words.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
This was written a long time ago, and it was based on history. All of Star Wars is reasonably political. It's just that most people never noticed it until this episode was put into the puzzle. Sometimes the politics are kind of confused and muddled in terms of the way people see it, which is the way most people see politics. But it's because they're confused and muddled that people don't want to have anything to do with it. But of course, if they don't want to have anything to do with it, that's why they end up turning to somebody to take over and clean it all up. So the involvement here of the Trade Federation and the Commerce Guilds and all these corporations who basically are having too much influence over the Senate, which allows them not to be able to do their job, is what actually starts this whole mess. And Palpatine is able to utilize that corruption and that greed on the part of the Trade Federation to further his purposes. And obviously, he's the one that is encouraging the Trade Federation to separate from the Republic and take a bunch of the systems with them that they have a lot of influence over. But all that doesn't become really apparent until you see that he's been using everybody and everything to really achieve the ultimate power.
Destroy the Sith. We must.
To me, this interchange between Obi-Wan and Yoda is one of the most important scenes in the film. To me, it was always that Yoda understood what they needed to do next. That he has to talk to Obi-Wan, that he has to convince Obi-Wan that they must go off and get the Sith. And to get that across in a shot like this here, a really great close-up, the intensity in his face was something that was really important to me from an animation point of view. And then ultimately, it was this look over the shoulder. It was getting the right balance and that head tilt and those eyes. It sends a message to Obi-Wan, but it also sends a message to us, the audience, because he's looking right at us.
I love Ewan's performances in these ending sequences because he's inevitably drawn toward a very horrible reality that he has to participate in. And there's nothing he can do about it. He doesn't want to do it, but he has to keep continuing down that path because that's his destiny, so to speak, because he's sworn, to be a Jedi and to bring justice to the galaxy. And now he's faced with the only way he can do that is to confront his friend, who has also decided that he's going to bring justice to the galaxy. So they're both trying to do the same thing. Only one is doing it out of strength and power and doing things he knows are wrong. And the other one's doing the inevitable thing that he has to do that he really doesn't want to have to do, which is to get rid of his friend.
It appears that the Chancellor is behind everything, including the war. Palpatine is the Sith Lord we've been looking for.
In the scene with Padme, when she won't tell him, he realizes that the first thing she's going to do is run to Anakin. And that rather than push her for the answer here, he would simply follow her.
Not only were we blessed with this wonderful 16-year relationship we've had with Gavin Bouquet, our production designer, what really made episode 3 special for us, too, was the fact that we had two guys, Eric Tiemens and Ryan Church, are our concept designers, and they've been working with us since the middle of episode 2. This was really the first time that they got to do the concept design for a whole film, and they went places that I just never imagined that we'd ever get to. I mean, the sheer amount of work in terms of the detail of what had to be designed, the cityscapes, the vehicles, the furniture, it just was, they're just two of the most remarkable, talented people I've ever met. Anything to make the picture better, they were always there.
I put this little tone poem moment in here of all the dead Federation people and Anakin on the balcony contemplating what he's done. This is the first time he actually has a chance to think about what it is that's happened by himself. And the tear here says that he knows what he's done, but he has now committed himself to a path that he may not agree with, but he is going to go on anyway. It's the one moment that says he's self-aware, that he's rationalizing all his behavior, he's doing terrible things, but in the end he really knows the truth. He knows that he's evil now. There's nothing he can do about it. I mean, that's really the moment where I think the pathos of him getting stuck in that suit is real, because if he had to do it over, he probably wouldn't do it. But he can't. But no. He kind of can see the rest of the movie. Not in terms of him being defeated by Obi-Wan, but in terms of him going down a path that Padme can't follow. And the consequence that's going to have, and the fact that he's going to have to battle Obi-Wan. He knows at that point this is all going to end up with a fight between him and Obi-Wan. He knows that Padme may not buy into this new reality, and eventually she's going to sort of find out the truth. He made a pact with the devil, and now he's become the devil. But it's not a joyful thing for him. It's a sad thing. The thing that she says at the very end is, I know they're still good at him, and that Luke says later on in Return of the Jedi is, they're still good at you. It's sort of a recurring, because there is. That's the one thing that will bring balance back to the Force, is there's just a little ounce of good in him. It's his son that makes him realize that he made the wrong decision, and that the time for the rationalization is over, and he needs to do the right thing, which is to get rid of the Sith and bring balance to the Force.
All droid units shut down immediately.
Very good, my lord.
Huge map painting back there by Brett Northcutt, and then Miles Murphy put this particular shot together, which is one of my favorites. But one of the things that really helped was just that sort of heat shimmering effect that we worked so hard on. Pat Tuback and a bunch of guys did lots of different versions of that. I think it was Mike Conte helped out as well, and they were just putting on all these heat shimmers, which really, I know George sometimes felt that we were doing it too much, but I think it really gave it an atmosphere.
Definitely.
And I always felt like you wanted to convey the feeling that if you really did happen to stand outside, that you'd almost instantly combust, some ember would blow across and set you on fire, or you just feel just totally uncomfortable. But that's that interior of that ship, isn't it?
Yeah, this is really the beginning of the most perfect ending to me. I don't think there's a single beat that goes wrong from this moment on in the movie. I love this ash flying around.
Oh, the ash, I think, just gave it so much atmosphere, didn't it? And the smoke that the guys worked. So Jay Cooper, I remember, did a whole bunch of shots in here with all this I remember driving him crazy with all the smoke and ash that I wanted to add in the background. And I think this is one of the moments, when Eric Tiemens and Ryan were so great in terms of helping set the stage for all of this stuff, in terms of the design and just helping out with the environment and shaping it and stuff. And we were looking at a lot of reference from oil rigs and things like that. These very sort of heavy industrial kind of hard lit places, where you'd have this blue and white light mixing with just the incredible sort of the red ambient light of the actual planet itself.
I am becoming more powerful than any Jedi has ever dreamed of.
The whole backstory that was done in 73 really just described the general things that happened, that Anakin turned to the dark side, that she couldn't turn. And when she discovered that he was really more interested in power than he was in saving her, that she wouldn't have anything to do with him after that. So that was about all there was to this scene in terms of when they confront each other. It's really about her realizing that he's changed and that he's interested in becoming the Emperor of the universe, and that this isn't the guy she fell in love with. He's turned into a monster. And him, in his possessiveness and his need for greed, becoming extremely upset that she's not going to follow along. And then when he sees Obi-Wan, that sets him off. Earlier, and through very incarnations of the script, there was much more of a personal jealousy between him and Obi-Wan, but I pulled that out. Now it's just she's betrayed him because she brought him there to kill him.
I don't know you anymore.
Working on these sequences and then coming back and seeing what the guys with the sound did, because that was something that, when we're doing the visual effects, we often have some sound cues in terms of the dialogue and all of those sort of things, but you don't often have a lot of the sound effects that are added later that really create such a great sense of the atmosphere.
Well, Ben Burt and Matt Wood did a great job.
Absolutely.
Designing the soundtrack. It took almost 2 years.
One of the problems of Sith is that they're quick to anger. This scene with her, it was very important that we sort of set it up to the point where he chokes her, as he does with one of the generals in episode 4. But at the same time, he doesn't kill her or anything. He just, causes her to faint. But that you get to see that flash of anger that he now doesn't really have much control over.
You turned her against me! You have done that yourself!
And the reflectance of this ship, David Weitzberg actually did a great job of working on this sequence in terms of tying up all the you see the reflections on the inside of the ship. Just so many different people worked on these sequences, but I remember just those blue lights on the landing platform. Yeah. Pascal just worked out the right amount of flare and the atmosphere around them. Just those little details that we just pushed into all of the shots.
The whole point of a Jedi is you can completely control your anger. Now he's at a point where he can't control it at all. And it's because of his, need for control and power and being very upset when he doesn't have it. Obi-Wan's going to inevitably try to stop him.
Don't make me kill you.
And now he's assuming that she's in league with Obi-Wan. Not necessarily in a love relationship or anything, but in the basis that they're both on one side of the path, or going down one path, and he's going down the other.
I will do what I must.
You will try.
This was all real.
Yeah.
They really went at it. It's not sped up. It's
just the way they did it, yeah.
And of course, Hayden and Ewan loved it. The minute they don't have to act or say any dialogue, but just fight, they're just very happy.
The shot of Yoda getting rid of the Imperial Guards actually took me by surprise when I saw it with a real audience. We knew it was funny, but we never thought there was going to get the laugh that it did.
That gets a massive reception, doesn't it? Every time I've seen the movie, people love that moment. Yoda gets into the groove here.
When I went back and looked at Attack of the Clones, I was happy with where we'd got with Yoda. But in moving forward for episode 3, I felt that we needed to try something different. And one of the things I wanted to do was get the animators up and away from their computers. Part of that was that I wanted them to feel what it was like to do the actions, to walk like Yoda, or move like Grievous, or act out the lines and look at their faces so that we could really judge the level of acting and the kinds of movements that we were really trying to achieve in the animation. And for me, that was one of the successes of this film, was that we were able to put a little bit of our own spirit and a little bit of our own humanity into our digital characters.
Sword fighting this between Obi-Wan and Anakin is just really incredible. I mean, they practiced this for like 3 months. It's not sped up. It's really the way it is. And they are really fighting hard. We went through several kinds of swords, bamboo and then metal. And then finally we ended with carbon fiber swords because they would bend them or break them, or they were really hitting each other very hard, but they were moving very, very, very fast. It was astonishing to watch them on the set. Now this fight, when we get into it, I decided that eventually it would be partly like Yoda was in the last fight, but when we start out, it's mostly done with close-ups. There's a lot of pauses in it and not much fighting. And then later on it becomes a little bit like the old film where there's a lot of very fast fighting.
For me, this opening part of the battle between Yoda and Sidious was akin to the opening of the fight between Yoda and Dooku, what we called at the time the Battle of the Wizards, where the forces of good and evil face off against each other.
And then we moved on to the pod sequence, which was to give it a different feel. But you see here, it's mostly they make moves, they stop, they make moves, they stop. It's not a lot of the really fast stuff that we're used to in the other film. I do a little of it later, but ultimately I wanted to get away from the sword fighting into something more interesting than quite so repetitive. Again, a vast amount of sword fighting in this film. The scene with them on the table, there was a whole beginning to the scene that got cut out where Obi-Wan got both of the swords, which is one of the reasons why Obi-Wan is holding Anakin's lightsaber at the beginning of that scene. This sequence where they're fighting was so fast on the set that when they finished this, the entire set broke out in applause.
Of course, one of the challenges for us on episode 3 was to outdo the fight that we'd done in episode 2 with Yoda against Count Dooku. So you always want to outdo yourself or one-up yourself when you got to give it another opportunity. And to take it into this arena, to me, was just a stroke of brilliance. That we were taking this fight into the third dimension, as I called it. We rise up into the Senate, to take it to a place where we could actually destroy the place of government. The fight actually tears apart democracy. It actually rips the pods out of the walls and crashes them and destroys everything that Padme and Bail Organa and the people on the side of good have set up.
This is where the footage from Mount Etna really comes into play, because you just couldn't do spewing volcanic lava. We can do it flowing, but you just can't do it being shot. I mean, it's really hard. And by getting the real deal, it made that whole sequence work. Because if we'd tried to do it with the computers and a special effect, it just probably wouldn't have. I don't think we'd have ever gotten it right.
One of the things we wanted to do with Yoda in this fight was to do actions that we hadn't done before. You'll see a rolling tumble here that I'm really happy with because of what the clothes look like, but also the subtlety that the animator put in that I didn't even ask for, and how he skids across the surface a little bit. And then also I just love how Sidious is just throwing handfuls of these pods at Yoda. Shots like this with the cloth, it just looks absolutely real to me, and it adds so much to Yoda and his performance to have that realistic looking cloth on.
Ian is so good in this. Just this sequence, when I was shooting and I was giggling the whole time. He's just so evil. You just sit there and shoot it, and you can do take after take, and he's just this creepy, evil guy. I must say there's fun in that. I have to admit, when you got a really evil bad guy, it's sort of fun to watch him go to work.
Also like this fight because it takes place in 3 dimensions. We've got up and down as well as side to side. And we actually see Yoda leaping and flying almost, where we didn't see him do that before in episode 2. In episode 2, George wanted him to be, as he described, a Tasmanian devil, sort of spinning and leaping around. Where in this film, he's more majestic to me. He flies up and he lands. And we also get some very, very close-up shots of his eyes. And a shot like that where he falls away, we videotape ourselves. In that particular case, I was working with Tim Harrington, the lead animator on the sequence, and ended up hanging myself off of the side of a stairwell at ILM just so that Tim and I could look at what was really happening with my own face so that we could apply what we learned of our own physicality and apply that to Yoda's performance.
I saw it on the news that the volcano was erupting. I called Rick and I said, you got to send somebody there right away. So the cameraman and assistant went to Italy, rented a camera, sat out there and shot volcano shots for a couple of weeks.
Really, the reason we went to Mount Etna was just for research purposes. When we got there, we were actually hoping for much more lava because that's essentially why we went. But there was no lava. But the explosions were so breathtakingly beautiful. The power, the awe. I mean, the day would start off at like 3:30 in the morning and would take us about 3.5 hours to climb up.
After the trek.
The trek was so painful. And then we were the only people actually filming it. Often there'd be clouds. We even had snow one day. But eventually we got some really startling stuff, I think, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic.
Well, we were really lucky. You know, I mean, we had 3 years, but you don't really plan on a volcano erupting. But it did, so it was our good luck. In the part here where they hide behind the arm and the sound of the rocks hitting the side of the arm, it's a lot of very visceral.
It was amazing to be in Sydney watching Ewan and Hayden do this fight. These men are incredible athletes and incredible swordsmen, and they worked very, very hard with Nick Gillard, the stunt coordinator.
When we did this part where the arm falls, we had to have part of the set blue. It's all done in blue, but the set had to be able to spin and turn and be on different angles. And every day we would shoot it at a different angle to get it all to come out right. It's very laborious, I must say. This car that Bail Organa drives here is based on a Tucker. I mean, if you were to look at it very carefully. It's another reference to one of my movies. I guess we should have put a THX license plate on it, but we forgot.
To me, the shot of Yoda landing the ship and then this little dialogue he has with Bail Organa, the sadness in his face was really important. That we feel that he's lost. That we feel that he realizes he has to go into hiding, and to hit that emotional tone. This blue light around the bottom of the droids and the platforms was added later on in production. George felt at one point that we needed to feel that there was some cooling effect, that there was some kind of shield, a reason why our actors aren't burning up, being around this intense heat. So Roger Guyette and his team added this shield generator into these shots as another pass after they'd completed a lot of these shots. Help tell that story of the cooling.
When we finished this sequence, we'd shot all of the fighting part, but this is one of those areas where we had some dialogue earlier with them on the arm and in some other places that we cut out because it didn't seem to fit with all the fighting. But I still felt I needed to have some kind of confrontation with them, dialogue confrontation with them in the end. And so this scene where they talk right here on the platforms, I shot later. Some of it was material that was actually in other places, and some of it is new. But I felt it was important that there be some kind of a yelling match or something emotional right before they get into their final episode here.
Anakin, I have failed you. I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over. Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil!
For any of the shots where the Jedi here have to do any superhuman jumping, we were called upon to do digital versions of them. Like Christopher Lee and Ian McDermott, we created digital versions of Hayden and Ewan in costume, of course, so that we could put in a complete digital character. So anytime that one leaps from a platform to another, those will be digital characters. So this is a digital version of Anakin, and then there's going to be some shots coming up of Obi-Wan leaping off the platform where he'll be digital.
There's a lot of discussion about arrogance, both on the part of the Emperor and everybody else. And so the last real thing that Anakin says, other than "I hate you," is "You underestimate my power," which is sort of the height of arrogance. But this little sequence down here with him crawling up the side of the volcano and then catching on fire is one of the primary images that was from the very, very beginning. The original backstory, before I even wrote the script to episode 4, was this moment where he's climbing up the side of a volcano and catches on fire after Obi-Wan cut off his arms and legs. And it was really the image of this, that's how he got turned into Darth Vader. Which is a little striking, this shot right here.
That was actually a pickup too, by the way. So he picked up
those
Anakin's lightsaber.
Oh, right.
Because he eventually gives it to Luke, and we've kind of forgotten that.
Oh, yeah. So that sort of tying that loose end up.
You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you.
It's kind of gruesome, but it's necessary to get him into that suit. And it's also tragic. It also had to be, this has to be done in a way that Obi-Wan thinks that he's killed him, but he hasn't. So I wanted the flames to last until Obi-Wan left, and then they died down and got turned off, so to speak. Again, there's a lot in the movies which, in all 6 episodes, where different people say the same line under different circumstances, so it means different things, or it means the same things, or it's ironic. Here is one which is within this movie where the only thing she says is Anakin all right? And then when we get to Anakin, the first thing he says is Padme all right? Which is a kind of recurring technique that goes throughout the movies. And some of it's done as a joke, like I have a bad feeling about this, and some of it's done purely for irony or for some other reason, but it's purposely the exact same line repeated. Tried in a way to use a kind of a musical motif on this, where certain refrains keep continuing. You keep coming back to them over and over again.
It's interesting. I take the same road home every night that George does. And I come to work on the same road, but my God, he sees things. I can't even imagine this. He starts the day off, which is what I really love about him. He always comes in, and there's always this kind of there's like a little grin on his face, and it's always starts off the same thing. What if we did this? You can tell he's been thinking about it all night, and he's gotten really excited, and he rushes in, and then you're just confronted by these new ideas every day that evolve for 2 or 3 years.
This is a scene where originally the Emperor was pretty dark, and I had to brighten him up so that he's almost like death. He's this kind of almost white-faced figure, rather than a more realistic version, which was very, very dark and like he would normally look under the circumstances, but I wanted to have that kind of spooky death figure look about him.
The establishing shot of Polis Massa, which is this asteroid colony, is actually an homage to 2001. There's a shot on the moon surface when the ship is landing that George wanted to put a little homage to Kubrick in, so that's our little homage to him. This shot here of Yoda, these close-ups actually that are coming up, really are amazing. We would never have been able to do this on episode 2, but with the new skin shaders and the new paint that was created for Yoda, we can now achieve these super extreme close-ups. A shot like this, people don't probably think about it, but that's a digital R2-D2, and you can see him reflected in the ship. Reason being, they just couldn't control the R2 on a ramp like that. Anthony Daniels did walk down the ramp, and there was some concern, and I think they put some extra grip on the bottom of his shoes, but in that case, we did a digital R2. Shot like this, the only thing real in the shot is Sidious. Everything else is digital. These are the kind of shots, as an animation director, I'm always amazed to just see what the visual effects supervisors and the compositors can do. We're now at the Polis Massa Medical Center.
Because of the difficulty of shooting with newborn infants, we didn't have a real baby in Sydney when this sequence was shot. We had a sort of a rubber baby stand-in. So we shot the sequence with that, and then later when the scene was all edited, then we did a very carefully targeted shoot of Greg's infant. We had to shoot everything, and I think we had a 20-minute window to shoot everything. So the baby here is the newborn child of Greg Salter, who's one of our compositors on the show.
This sequence here with Vader being constructed was one of the sequences I, had always thought about since I was 13 years old. What would that look like?
I did actually sort of want to get that sort of interrogation room look, with this ridiculously hot light, so it just looked incredibly uncomfortable and very unsympathetic.
This sequence of her giving birth and Anakin being turned into Darth Vader originally was separate, 2 separate scenes. And then as we started editing, they started intercutting them more and more and taking some of the other materials that were irrelevant out of it so that it really just cut from her to him to her. And kept working it until we ended up with this final thing where the transitions are primarily from him to her, and that it's been broken up quite a bit because originally it was just she had the baby and then he became Darth Vader. One happened after the other.
I love this idea of getting inside the mask so that you as a member of the audience, and I think the other touch was just seeing him breathe for the first time. I remember we did the shot and then George came back and asked us just to disturb the smoke above the mouthpiece so that you could see him breathing for the first time, and with the sound it worked really well.
This is where you can really, it's hard to do it on a piece of paper, but once you get the movie in your hands, you can begin to see things and work with them, and eventually they evolve into what feels right for the movie itself. And just as the moment that he's born, she dies. So that we have that moment where he takes his first breath as Darth Vader, which is the symbol of him coming alive, and then that's followed by the scene of her saying there's still good in him and dying.
This was an amazing moment during the process of making the movie. It was shot at the end of the day. It was about 10 days before we finished shooting the movie. And I went to go pick up Hayden in a golf cart. But he insisted playing this. He really wanted to be in the suit. And when I came back with him, there were about 1,000 people outside the stage. Everybody from the studio
wanted to see this moment.
We opened up the stage doors and I let about 400 or 500 people come in, as much as we could get in. Everybody sat down on the floor. George did a couple of takes. Hayden got off, and then everybody just came up and touched him. It's like this moment. Most of the people, honestly had gotten into the film business because of Star Wars. It was just a great, great day.
And this, I went back and forth in terms of how much dialogue I was going to put in here. It became how much is too much for this scene. I wanted him to get a sense that he was like a Frankenstein monster that had been created when he came off the table, without making it too obvious, but at least give that sensation that the Emperor has created some kind of monster, and that Anakin has actually become a monster, not only physically, but also in his soul.
really beautiful matte painting that Yannick Dussault did for this. George had actually cut it out of the movie while it was still being worked on, and when I heard that, I ran it for him in the screening room, and he liked it enough that he put it back in the movie.
One of the things was just like working on the cloth of Yoda's cloak. We developed this technique of adding these little sort of knotty bits.
Yeah, Rob told me that I was personally an inspiration for that.
Really?
He used the little thing for my shirts.
What did he call? What were they called? They had some funny name for those.
Fuzzball thing.
Fuzzball thing.
I never figured out how Yoda's supposed to be moving this chair. We talked about it a bit at the time, and George decided, well, he's using the Force.
This particular scene with them all sort of tying everything up, a lot of exposition, and I tried to cut the film at one point with this all out, because it really is just exposition of material that really doesn't have to be there, but the film did not fare well with all this gone. There's something very satisfying about having all the little pieces wrapped up, but Obi-Wan in this scene, there's just this hint. And again, there's a lot more to this, but I cut it down to the bare minimum. But there's a hint of how Obi-Wan eventually in Episode 4 has learned to give up his physical being and become one with the Force. And you understand here that his old master Qui-Gon had something to do with that. His old master Qui-Gon had been able to come back from the netherworld of the Force to somehow teach him how to do that.
The funeral scene came out beautifully. Again, we shot this on a green stage with about 8 or 9 extras.
And just about every member of the crew is in this.
Yeah. Any of these close-up shots on Natalie, she's so breathtaking. And you can really see the detail on all of the costumes that Tricia Bigger designed.
This close-up of Jar Jar and Boss Nass, for that matter, was added very late in the game. I think Boss Nass was added to the shot with only about a week or two left in animation. We actually had to go back to Episode 1, restore that model, and we were worried that it wouldn't work because it was all those years ago. But it actually plugged in very quickly, and we were able to do it and plug it in for George. Originally, Jar Jar wasn't going to have his close-up, but there he is. He gets his one close-up in the film. When I read the script originally, I was worried that we were going to have to create a digital version of Peter Cushing. And in fact, I talked to Christopher Lee at length about Peter because they were friends. But it turns out that they found someone in Sydney, and the creature department was able to put a prosthetic on his face, and he looked incredibly like Peter Cushing.
And we took it over to George and showed it to him and said, wouldn't this be great if we had him in the last scene as both Palpatine and Vader look out? And George bought it immediately.
All the films end with a musical sequence where it's all visual and a minimum amount of effects. This has actually got the longest, most complicated version of that. But this one not only is an ending, but it also ties up each story and brings it into where we're going to be in the next film. This one, there's a 20-year leap, but each thing is, you realize that Princess Leia is given to her adopted mother. Obviously, there's a little bit of a stretch with the Death Star being started in this one, and then 20 years later it gets finished. But, they had supply problems and union disputes and a few design problems they had to work out. So it took longer than you would think, even for the Empire. Exactly how it is that Obi-Wan turns the baby over to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. It goes off into the hills to watch over him. I'd always felt that I wanted to end the movie on the image of the twin sons, which was such a strong image in Episode 4. It seems like the perfect icon for the movie, because it really became the icon for Episode 4 in my mind. The films are designed to be one movie. It started out as the tragedy of Darth Vader. It was meant to be one movie, Episode 4. You never knew what came ahead, you never knew what came behind. But in order to write it, I had to write a backstory first that said who each characters were, where they come from, and the subtitle of the movie really was The Tragedy of Darth Vader. It started out with this monster coming in, throwing everybody around, threatening people, choking guys. And halfway through the movie, you realize that the monster is actually a man. He's the father of the hero. And then at the end of the movie, you realize that the son inspires the monster, or the father, to be the hero of the movie. And that he'd been living this terrible life, trapped in this suit. He'd sold his soul to the devil, and all that stuff was supposed to be stronger than it was when I ended up breaking it into 3 parts. And the icon of Darth Vader became so strong as the icon of evil. It was hard to sort of think of him as a tragic character. That's one of the things that made me go on and do the first 3 episodes, so that you get more of a sense of how the whole story was. But ultimately, now, with its final piece in place, I hope people think of it as one movie, and not as 6 little movies, but as one large movie, and as the tragedy of Darth Vader, which is what it originally was meant to be.
Well, this has been a really great experience for me. I've grown quite a bit as an artist over the course of doing these. They're long and tiring to do, but they're also great fun. I've really enjoyed doing them. And the crew's been great. George has been great. It was a really fun time. I'm going to miss Star Wars.
For me, all I have to do is see the shot on Tatooine with the 2 suns, and I'm instantly transported back to the summer of 1977 as a 13-year-old watching this movie and then watching it again and watching it again. And I'm reminded of what it felt like to be there at that time and seeing these movies. It's still surreal to me that I got to be the animation director on episodes 1, 2, and 3, to have the role that I did on these films and to have the input on the films and to have the opportunity to work with George Lucas and Rick McCallum on these films. It was truly more than a dream to come true.
Well, when I look back on the last 12 years of doing all 3 films, plus the special edition, it's a kind of very bittersweet moment to be here at this place now where we're doing the commentary on the DVD. The film's been out for about 3 weeks. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that we were able to keep together all of our shooting crew for almost 16 years since we started Young Indie together. And, for all of us to kind of grown up and finally, reach a point where we all know that, the chances are we'll never really work together again like this. Has been a really incredible experience for both George and I. It's been absolutely fantastic. And also to have gone through so much with ILM, just the complexity, again, the amount of people who've worked on the film for so long, people who can spend maybe 2 or 3 months on a single sequence. It's been an awesome, fantastic experience, I think, for all of us, and certainly has provided incredible job security. No, it's been great. We're so lucky because we get to work for a writer-director who has a very clear idea of the essence of what he wants, and then to be able to share in this kind of experience of watching him evolve each day with each shot is just, it's just remarkable. I don't know if it can ever be really done again in film history. It's been such a special moment for all of us because we've been able to do something that millions and millions of people respond to, and that doesn't happen very often. It's just incredibly gratifying. So you just seize those little victories. You don't take it too seriously and say, thank God I had an amazing decade where I got to work with some of the truly most talented people.
This experience was it was actually more than anything, it was just a lot of fun and just so enjoyable from so many different levels. I mean, you work with so many different people and there's so many different challenges, and ultimately, it was a great experience. And Star Wars is such an incredible phenomena. It's placed in cinema history, and just being part of that is an amazing experience too. But I had a really good time. I enjoyed it. I was there for the best part of a year, but it was a great experience and met and worked with some great people, so I'll always remember it very fondly.
I can't thank you enough. I owe you big time.
I really did have a good time. And that was the interesting thing about working with George is, feeling like you're contributing and not just being told where to put things, you know what I mean? And I think that's sort of interesting about George because he kind of knows what he wants, but it's at that higher level that you can fiddle with the detail and still enjoy the process and just a range of work. I mean, if you work in visual effects, you're not going to work on too many things of this scale.
To be able to shoot in 8 countries, with the incredible talent that we had, and 12 planets, 8 new ones, 2,900 setups, 50 setups a day. Incredible. Real output. Almost 2,100 people who worked on the film, not all at the same time, but over the course of the 3.5 years. 10,000 separate drawings, concept work done. So cool.
This movie was started out as one simple little movie that would take me about 2 years to make, and then I'd go on to other things, and it turned out to be 20 years of my life. And it was a real challenge to make, and it sort of defined my life, which is not where I expected to be, but I'm, very happy to have gone on this ride and met the challenges that the film presented to me, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. I'm happy with all the episodes. I'm happy with the overall story, and I'm very relieved that I made it to the end, to the finish line, and the world is still here to see it.